Garden Success is brought to you in part by The Arbor Gate, featuring unusual plants, artisan-created decorative pieces, and a constantly changing array of items that bring beauty, comfort, and even flavor to the home and garden. Arbor Gate, 15635 FM 2920, Tomball, Texas, 281-351-8851 or arborgate.com.
Garden Success is also brought to you by The Farm Patch, 3519 South College Avenue in Bryan, 979-822-7209.
Welcome to Garden Success with Skip Richter, the show designed to help you have a bountiful garden and a beautiful landscape. Call in now with your lawn and garden questions at 979-845-5689 or email your questions to gardensuccess@tamu.edu. And now, Texas A&M AgriLife Extension horticulturist Skip Richter.
Well, hello and welcome to Garden Success. We are looking forward today, as always, to talking to you about anything you're interested in gardening related. We'll limit it like that. Our phone number, if you want to write this down and give us a call, it's 845-5689. If you're outside the Bryan College Station area, it's 979-845-5689. 979-845-5689, or you can email us at gardensuccess, one word, at tamu.edu. gardensuccess@tamu.edu. So we'll get started here. We're going to talk about a number of different things today. I want to talk a little bit about, we had some emails. Let's take a couple of those. Greg emailed a picture of a cypress. It looks like a Leyland cypress that has a dead branch in it. So the whole tree is green. Well, the rest of the tree that I see in the picture is green, but this whole branch is turned kind of a rusty tan brownish color. And what is happening when you see that is if you follow the dead branch down toward where it attaches to either the trunk or to a living branch, there's going to be something going on there. Now, in Leyland cypress, it's probably a canker, a disease that kills the bark tissues, the living translocative tissues underneath the surface, and so no water can get up there, and the branch just literally turned brown real quickly in the warm season. And the problem with Leylands is they're prone to that. And we live in an area that gets quite a bit of rainfall. And so you may get by without any problems at all for a number of years. And then when it starts to hit, if you've got a very large tree, and Leylands get very large, then you're going to have kind of an unsightly, perhaps lopsided or malformed tree on your hands. There are fungicides that can be sprayed, but I just don't think that's real practical for someone, with just a home landscape type plant, or maybe one out on a property, just because being able to get good coverage and then having to mix it up and do it on a periodic basis to protect those trees is probably not practical. Now, Leyland is also one of the two trees primarily grown in East Texas as a Christmas tree. Virginia pine is the other one, but Leyland cypress, and some growers are using Leylands as Christmas trees as well. They shear very well. They make that pyramidal form that people are looking for, and they're evergreen, of course. So, if you had a Christmas tree farm, well, you could afford to go down the rows with a air blast sprayer and get the trees through that. I don't know that they do that, but that could be done. But a backyard or a property, not really practical. So what I would do is get up there. This looks like not too large of a tree yet, and prune out the dead areas, going as far back as you can to where it joins living tissues. And if it looks like you're literally pruning in the canker area, then I would probably cut back a little further if you could. And you're just going to have to back up and say, what's the tree going to look like if I remove a branch here? And then when you prune it, get it out of there. Don't leave it, because that is a source of reinfection and inoculum for your tree. So that, I think, is not the best news, probably, Greg, but that's what I see. The only other next step you might take is if you wanted to bring a sample from that branch, taken all the way down where they can actually see something, to the state plant clinic here on campus at A&M. They can, West Campus, they can diagnose it for you. But to bring them the dead end of the branch, there's not going to be a disease present there. It's going to be down further where it essentially cut off the supply. So follow the dead all the way down into the living to get that sample. We had another email come in from Bob about some freeze damage to an oak tree trunk. And it's a live oak, and one side of the trunk, the bark in a long strip up the trunk, it looks like 2 or 3 feet or more, is dead, and the bark is sloughing off. And in the picture, you can see that the tree is trying to callus from the sides of that wound and cover back over. That's what happens when we do a pruning cut, or when anything damages a tree. The living tissues begin to form a callus and try to close back over that wound. And in this case, there's a lot of callus growing, and it looks to me to be about over half healed already, and that was from back in the February freeze. And so I would just wait and leave it. It's a live oak. The wood's pretty tough. It's not going to be rotten in a year or two, and it'll close back over, and I think it'll be just fine. I wouldn't worry about it. I asked Bob about, is it on the southwest side of the tree, and he said yes. And I think that's kind of an interesting phenomenon. But in fact, sometimes people call and describe that, and I say, is it on the southwest side? And there's this pause and silence, like, how would you know that? Well, here's how. The warmest part of the day is at the end of the day. You get around 4 o'clock, and whether it's winter or summer, that's the warmer part of the day. That's also the time of day that the sun is in the southwestern sky. So in winter, the sun is traveling low, so it's kind of coming in under some of the branches to shine directly on that trunk and warm those tissues on the southwest side. Trees can go dormant, they can enter a period where they're more cold hardy. They develop some hardiness there, and when it warms up, then those tissues start. Think of it as the juices start to flow, and they become very susceptible to cold. So after a warm day like that, or even a cooler day with the sun, that night it goes down and freezes like our February freeze did, and the rest of the tissues are adequately hardy to make it, but those are not. And so you get freeze damage in a strip up and down the trunk on the southwest side of the tree. It can happen in other areas. It can happen in a open prune tree to a branch that's exposed to the sun. But that, we call it southwest injury. It's something we deal with in fruit trees, and certainly happens in landscape trees too. And I've seen it all over the country. I was out in Atlanta not too long ago, walking on the big pathway around the city, and I have a wonderful walkway around the town, and I saw tree after tree after tree that had that damage on the southwest side. These were young trees. They had very thin bark, so it was very easy for them to warm up and suffer that kind of damage. So no fixing it. I guess if you knew it was going to happen, you could put something to kind of shade that side of the tree. Some people wrap stuff around the tree, but we generally don't recommend that. Well, let's go to the phones, and again, our number is 845-5689, and talk to John. Hello, John.
Hey, Skip. Mary's got a few sweet potatoes that she's got growing in a bottle now, or in bottles, and they've got growth on the top of them. Some of them, stems, like some of them are 2 feet long, some of them are shorter.
Right.
But they're not as big as a pencil. I mean, they're pretty skinny. Are those going to be suitable to use to plant?
I would not. When they are growing slips for the early summer, late spring, whatever, sweet potato planting, they're typically laying potatoes out in a bed of sand or something and getting really vigorous, strong shoots coming off of them in the sun, and they break those off or cut those off. They can also harvest them from existing vines somewhere, potato vines. But what we find is that any shoot that is spindly never will make good potatoes. It may make some swollen roots, but not what you're looking for at the harvest time. In fact, potatoes, there's roots that end up being finger-like around a plant, and then there's roots that end up being the swollen storage structures we really are growing them for. And there's several things we do along the way that where we end up with a bunch of finger-sized sweet potatoes, and you may have seen that before. So I wouldn't try to raise my own slips that way. If you wanted to raise slips, buy some sweet potatoes, stick them on their side down in a bed of sand, and get some good vigorous shoots off of them and plant from that. You could certainly do it that way.
Okay, that's. I think we understand that. We've got some red mulberry volunteers, and they look pretty good. Is there anything wrong with transplanting those?
Well, there are a lot of people have different opinions about different kinds of trees, but I find mulberry to be very fast growing, but very weedy. It's a weedy tree. The birds eat the berries, and they both plant and fertilize with one flick of the tail. So you end up with mulberries coming up all around, just like you have poison ivy comes up that same way, and hackberries can come up that same way. So I find them to not necessarily be a long-term desirable tree, but there are people who want some mulberries. We have one behind our house in the neighbor's yard, and I tried to get some mulberries from it, but the mockingbirds beat me to them every day. And so any mulberry that got close to being worth picking was long gone by the time I got there. So.
All right. What about we have what is it? It's a real thorny blackberry,
Mm-hmm.
and it's pretty vigorous and it's growing well.
Okay.
Should we cut it back now? I mean, way back? Or?
So at this point in the season, I would. It's one single plant, or is it a row of plants?
It's one single plant.
Okay. At this point in the season, if you could just leave it be and not prune it, I would. The only exception to that is if it had a cane that grew not in 2021 but in 2022 and died in 2021, then you get that cane out of there. But the shoots that grew this year, just leave them on that single plant. And that way you'll get a few blackberries out of it, and it'll be a more robust plant, so that then later, if you want, you can dig it up and do root cuttings, little pencil-sized root cuttings, and make more of them if you decide you like that berry. But normally what we do in pruning blackberries is in the winter or after harvest, rather, not in the winter, excuse me, we prune out all of the harvested canes because they're going to die and just become a bramble thicket. And we leave the new canes, and then when they reach about chest high, we pinch the tops off out of them or snip the tops out of them, and that forces them to provide or grow long side shoots, and those long side shoots will hold our crop. And by pinching them early in the year like that, or right after harvest rather, in summer, we end up with a lot more production for that one cane than just a cane that grows on its own.
We had a thornless blackberry as well, but I don't think it made it through the.
Okay. Well, there's some good ones out there.
I like the blackberry, but I hate those thorns. Man.
Yeah, but there's some really good thornless varieties out there. They're not going to be really easy to find. You'd have to ask a local garden center if they could order them for you, or order a mail order yourself or something. But there are two varieties I like, and we've had a listener that was not fond of them, but one, oh gosh, what's the Primark Freedom, Primark, Primark, and that's the Primark means that it's a primocane bearing. In other words, it bears the first year on those shoots, but it also bears the second year. But we don't have many primocane bearing blackberries, but most of the time you're having to wait till the shoot goes through winter to get fruit on it. Not with.
And what was the name of it again?
Primark, Primark. The ARK means it was developed in Arkansas by the Extension Service or research up there. And there's two Primarks that I would grow here. One is Freedom and one is Traveler, and they're pretty good. There is a new one called Ponca that I have a plant of, but I haven't had it long enough to know how well it's going to do. That seems to be pretty good. And there's some others. There's one called Wachita, like the Native American tribe in the Ozarks. Like, how is it? Oauch. I'm misspelling it, but it's Wachita. Doesn't begin with a W, begins with an O. That's another pretty good one, and I'm probably missing one or two that I just can't think of. But the old thornless berries were nothing to write home about, other than that they were thornless. But the newer stuff coming out is pretty cool, really nice, really nice, and I would say worth planting. They're vigorous and pretty dependable.
Okay, well that's good. We may do that.
Okay. And if you can't find them or a source or nobody locally can order them in for you, just contact me at the extension office and let me or send me an email, and I'll send you some possible sources.
Okay, appreciate it.
All right. Thank you for the call, John.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Our phone number, 979-845-5689, or by email at gardensuccess@tamu.edu. gardensuccess@tamu.edu. A moment ago, we were just talking about southwest injury to tree trunks, and I just wanted to talk a little bit more about some of our trees. We went through the February freeze, and we had a lot of plants that we just kept saying, wait and see, wait and see, wait and see. With the cycads or sago palms in our yard, the palm trees, the true palms that are in our yards, and then even some larger shade trees that had significant damage. What we found is most of the things that we were waiting and watching on came through okay. Some of them had significant bark injury. The Chinese elms, I've seen some that are fine and some that had significant bark injury. Interestingly enough, Chinese elm normally flakes off bark in little pieces, little patches, which is part of the beauty of the trunks, the gray and rusty colored patches. But this year, and I think as in a response to the freeze, it was sending off larger sheets of bark, that were maybe 3/16 or 1/8 of an inch thick. They're a lot thicker than normal, and but underneath was living tissues, so they're going to be fine. But if you see wood, the interior wood, then that's going to have to slowly be closed back over as callus grows in. Now, if that's a narrow spot, maybe the width of your hand, the tree will close it over pretty fast and it'll be fine. The wider it gets, the longer it takes. And if that wood is sitting exposed to the rain and the elements and the microbial activity that decays wood in the forest, then over time you start to get a decay. And then even if it closes, you've got the internal decay there. But if it decays too much, it can't close. The callus just sort of curls under the opening in the tree trunk. And so you just kind of have to look at your tree, walk around it, and again, a little patch, even the size of the width of your hand, that's okay. Don't worry about it if it's a healthy tree. But if you got several of those, or a large portion of that trunk as you go around the trunk has been killed, then that may be one to kind of rethink. Maybe it's time to put a different tree in here. And a good certified arborist can advise you more on that. But that's something I've noticed around town. Some of the live oaks, some of the I have red oak or two I've seen that just had significant top kill. And when we go into cold, and of course the February 7 degrees we had, that's unusual and that's rare. At least we hope it is. It has been in the past, very rare. And so we don't base our gardening off of what might happen once every 50 years or something. But the that kind of cold has taught us a lot about how plants are doing here, how well adapted they are, how they grow. But it also taught us that, and we knew this already, tree specialists have always known this, but when a tree goes into winter, if you've got it in a vigorous state, water and fertilizer and everything, and you're really getting it growing fast, when that cold weather comes, it just isn't hardened off, and it's more likely to suffer cold damage than a tree that had been allowed to harden off naturally. And that's true of a lot of trees, fruit trees, nut trees, shade trees, and even like a fig tree. Those are somewhat cold susceptible, but we don't want to push that into late season growth. And so it just is a reminder in how we take care of our trees being as important, if not more important, than the specific species we plant regarding hardiness. Now, certainly you can plant trees that are going to freeze here almost every year, like an avocado tree. But I'm saying in general, we need to be taking good care of them. We don't need to be pruning in the fall, especially the fruit trees. If you prune your peaches in the fall when the leaves fall off, you will end up with flowering being more likely to get frosted the next spring because they bloom a little bit earlier. And we want our peach trees to bloom as late as possible because we want to be past the danger of frost when that happens. So fall pruning, it's not night and day difference, but it does make them a little more predisposed to a freeze damage in the spring to the blooms. If you have a citrus tree, the Satsuma oranges are fairly hardy. Now, once a tree is established, not a brand new tree or a 1-year-old tree sitting out there, but once a Satsuma is established, we've had cases here in Texas where it's going to go down into the mid-20s and be okay, which is surprising for a citrus, right? Maybe even a little bit lower. I don't want to give you too low of a number because I don't want it'll prove me wrong. But if you push that tree into a lot of growth, we've totally changed that game. And so learning to take care of our plants like that and to make sure that they harden off properly is really important. And we've had a number of questions on trees this year because of the freeze and shrubs. A lot of the waxleaf ligustrum just never really came back. There are certain places in town where it's fine, but there's some others where you got a few sprouts coming out of the bottom, but the top part is just scraggly looking. I would wait until the end of winter because, again, pruning is another invigorating activity. When you prune a plant, let's say you pruned something pretty heavily in late October, just to give an example, or mid-October, you're going to get a lot of regrowth, and all that regrowth is succulent, tender, and cold sensitive compared to the plant itself under normal conditions. So wait until the end of winter and then just cut these things back. Cut them back to healthy new growth. If you got some long, lanky wild hairs coming out of the bottom there of the shrub, well, just snip the tops off and force them to branch more. If you think about it, these tall, upright shoots, these shrubs are always reaching to the sky to get more sunlight. So if you allow shrubs to go unpruned, they become very top-heavy. The top spreads out, it captures all the sunlight, and the interior lower parts of the shrub lose the foliage for lack of sunlight, and it is virtually impossible to get good foliage back in there again unless you severely prune them back. So our goal, the plant's goal is to get light. Our goal is to make a solid hedge of foliage to hide a view or just to be pretty. And so we want to, as the new growth comes up, to snip the top out, shear the top out, maybe cutting it back by a third or so as you go. And then it branches. And then as that starts to go, we cut it again. So what was one shoot becomes 2 to 3 shoots, and what was 2 to 3 shoots becomes 4 to 6 shoots, and so on. And it just gets denser and denser. So if you're trying to renovate an old ligustrum shrub that had a lot of cold damage, or other species that had the same kind of thing, that's the way to do it. Texas sage, Cenizo, native out in West Texas. You head out I-10 to Uvalde and you get to see a lot of it. Texas sage can grow over here. It not real crazy about all our rainfall, but it'll grow here if it's taken care of and given good drainage. That's a plant that does tend to have all its foliage on the outside, and especially if you shear it, which is not really a great way to take care of that plant. I like a more natural thinning pruning on the plant, but once it does that, you're not going to get foliage back inside. So if you shear it too much or a branch breaks off, the kids throw a basketball into the shrub and a branch breaks, and now you got this hole in the shrub, and it's not going to just fix itself inside there. They get large. So I have more than once taken one of those back to knee high, and it looks horrible. Close your eyes, don't go look at it for a few months. Now actually go out there as it starts to regrow and do the shearing I'm talking about. Shear it periodically, let it sprout side shoots, and then after a little bit shear it again, and you can have a very tame, appropriately sized shrub out of something that had become very overgrown. So those are just some thoughts on some of the cold injuries that we saw and some of the pruning and things. So I hope you heard in that we don't want to be pruning. We really don't want to be pruning anything right now. It's just better to wait until spring. For things like, let's say you have a live oak and it's got a branch that needs to come off. Well, you can prune it any time of the year, technically. If you're going to do more than just a small bit here or there, I would wait until the end of winter for sure, because the fastest healing time is in the spring. And if we wait till the end of winter, we don't want to invigorate with pruning. We want it to stay nice and hardy there. But if we wait until that time, new growth begins and it heals over really fast, and it just does well. It's not night and day. It's not a black and white absolute. You cannot prune until February, but January and early February is a good time to do a lot of that kind of pruning if you need to do it. Well, our phone number, 845-5689, 845-5689, or Garden Success at tamu.edu. Email us at gardensuccess@tamu.edu. It is awfully quiet out there today. I think we're entering the Christmas season. I can't imagine why everyone is not sitting at their radio wanting to talk gardening right now. I think we have a few more things to do. I'll probably talk a little bit of holiday stuff here in just a moment. I want to go back to the emails, and Evelyn asked, what is the yellow blooming flower out at the gardens at A&M? And by the way, if you have not been to the gardens at A&M, you gotta go. You gotta see them. If it's been a couple of months since you've been, you still need to go back out. They're dressed up for the holidays out there. It's a beautiful gardens. Lots of exciting new developments to come in the years to come. But it's a beautiful place, and it's decorated up for the holidays. On weekends, Lot 97 is if it's not a assigned space, it's free parking out there. There are paid spots, but they usually stay kind of filled up during the week. But on weekends, you can go out for a visit and see the gardens and walk through. Anyway, back to the question. Evelyn asked, what is the yellow flower out there? And I talked to Joseph Johnson. Joseph is the guy heading up the care of the gardens and part of the planning and all the things that go on around there. And Joseph said that is a Sunny Beach primrose. Sunny Beach is sometimes used as a variety name, but it's primrose is Onothera, and this one is Drummondii. Onothera Drummondii. And so if you get out there before frost, you can see what they look like. They bloom and bloom and bloom all through the season with these big old giant, almost petunia-like yellow blooms. Well, let's go to the phones now, and we're going to talk to Ken. Hello, Ken.
Hey, how are you today?
I'm well, thank you.
I've got a question about what we call Christmas cactus.
Mm-hmm.
They're just starting to bloom right now, and I wish I don't have the plant name, but anyway, we've had these a while, and here's my question. how do you take care of these over time? I've noticed that if I get a new one, it'll bloom great the first year, blooms good the second year, and then it starts diminishing. And I'm thinking I either need to fertilize it in some way, or maybe replant it,
Okay.
to invigorate it or something. How do you properly take care of those things?
Well, that's a great question, and it is Christmas cactus or Thanksgiving cactus. There are two different things. The Christmas cactus has a little more of a point on the edges of the leaf. So the edges of the leaf on those are sort of serrated, right? And the Christmas cactus is going to have a little bit more of a point. I think is a better way to put that. But and I'm going to check that, make sure I'm saying that right. I may have those two things turned around. But I'm sorry, the Thanksgiving cactus is the one that has more of the points, and the Christmas cactus looks a lot alike, but the edges, the serrated edges, are just not quite as pointed. To confuse things further, there's also an Easter cactus that is very rounded on the edges, but they're all basically the same. And they're, the plant is a succulent, but it's not a desert plant. But it can grow, and it likes moisture, but it definitely doesn't want to be kept too wet. So you want to put it in a big pot, allow it to dry out just a bit, not much, and water it again. It likes a lot of sunlight, and sometimes you see them being grown indoors, but it doesn't want to be in that low of a light unless you just have a really bright indoor spot. Mine spent the summer outside under a arbor that was probably cast about a 50% shade or something like that in a pot, and I forgot to water it several times. It survived. It did just fine, and now it's already producing buds and getting ready to bloom again. The key to the bud setting is the change in day length. So, or actually, I'm technically I should say night length. As the period of darkness gets longer, all of our fall blooming plants are initiated into blooming. So something like a poinsettia goes through that. The Copper Canyon daisy and the fall aster and other things like that. The Mexican mint marigold in the herb garden. So what you can do if you want it to bloom earlier is when you go to work every morning, you carry the plant from inside your house outside to set down. When you come home from work every day, 5 o'clock, let's say, you bring the plant inside. So you basically tell the plant that daylight begins at 8 or 7 o'clock in the morning, and daylight ends at 5 o'clock. So you're controlling the amount of darkness. And that's how we make poinsettias bloom earlier than they naturally would. But for most people, including myself, I'm not going to get around to doing all that. So I just leave it outside. It's started to bud now. It's much later than those that you buy in the store. The growers have taken care of that for you. They've gone to the trouble. But they don't carry plants in and out. They just shade the whole greenhouse. But anyway.
It's interesting to hear you say how you take care, because basically I take mine, when spring comes, I take them and put them out underneath some cover where it's underneath some yaupon and stuff like that.
Yes.
So it gets partial sunlight.
Right.
It doesn't get baked,
Yeah, exactly.
And it's mostly noonday. It's kind of on the east side of the house, so it doesn't get blasting sun in the afternoon to heat the pot up and cook the roots.
Exactly. And so do that. Fertilizing helps in small amounts. Don't overdo it, but just continually feed them and encourage growth. I have seen pictures of Christmas cactus that looked like they were 4 feet across, and you can imagine what a monster that was. So they can grow like crazy if you just take care of it. They really like it to be about 65 degrees at night. And if it gets a little bit cooler, it even helps with the bud set. Maybe if I have a 40-degree night, I'm not leaving it out. But if it's going to be 50 to 55 or so, that's actually good. And it helps with that initiation.
Right. And my practice has just been to leave them out there until the buds really set and they look, starting to grow pretty good.
Yes.
Then I bring it inside,
Okay.
and they open up pretty nicely. So
Okay.
I was just wondering if, particularly about the soil. I may have one where I put some soil that wasn't sandy enough into the pot.
No, actually, you can use just good potting soil. It's a shame we call them cactus because that makes people treat them wrong.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, they are a succulent, but you can use. I have just regular potting soil in mine. If you want to put a little bit of sand in for grit and improving drainage, that's fine. But they're really not hard to grow if you give them the light they want and then a little bit of nutrient to keep them growing, and don't let them stay too dry for too long.
And just any particular kind of fertilizer? It's just anything, any kind of mix, or just a house plant fertilizer type stuff?
I think I would just buy one of the soluble products and just use that.
Okay.
We're talking about a container grown plant, and we're not doing soil tests and all the kind of stuff like out in the garden. So I would just use at the lowest label rate, one of those soluble products when you water it. And that way you will not burn it, but it always has nutrients available. Okay? All
right. Well, I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
they've been hanging in there, and they just seem to diminish over time. So I want to see if I can have them go a little bit better through this next season.
Yeah. Now I would back off on the fertilizing once we get to midsummer or so. Mid to late summer, I don't think it'd be good to fertilize them going into fall. I could be wrong about that, but a lot of times when we're trying to get something to bloom and set buds, if we push it into vegetative growth, that could be a problem. So that's me giving an educated guess. I won't tell you that's a fact. Okay?
All right. Well, thanks so much for taking my question.
All right, Ken. Thank you. Let's go to the phones now and talk to Stacy. Hey, Stacy. Thanks for waiting.
Oh, no problem. I just one thing I want to make a comment, and I have a question. So the comment was, I do have the Primark Freedom, and that is actually my favorite blackberry.
Oh, is it?
Growth area. I actually have some right now giving me berries.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
Wow. Okay, cool. Now, what part of the BCS area are you in?
I'm in Bryan.
Oh, in Bryan. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, that is good to know. I had a fellow that listens tell me that he had trouble with those two. Or one of the two. I can't remember now which one it was.
I had trouble with the Traveler. The Traveler didn't make it.
Okay. The cold weather?
Honestly, it's the summer.
Oh, okay.
It for some reason didn't like the heat, and even though I watered, it was in the same line because I had it was one row, and I had half of them in Freedom and half of them in Traveler, and after the second year, the Traveler just never made it. But the Freedom, they're huge berries too. They're not super sweet, at least, but that could be partly weather each year.
Yeah. Well, there's a commercial patch of blackberries down if you head toward Houston, and right when you get to Buc-ee's, it's just north of there about a mile. And they do well with both Traveler and Freedom as well as several other varieties of thornless.
Yeah, no, I love having the thornless. My only problem is trying to keep the Bermuda grass from growing out under you. No matter how much time I mulch, it always seems to creep back in.
Oh, again. I know. That's part of the deal, but that's
good.
So
the other question I had, though, it's always the problem this time of year, and in the summer it goes away, is a stinging nettle. It's like a small 1-inch serrated leaf, but man, it hurts if you touch that with skin. And if there's anything, it's in my lawn is the problem.
Is it a I say round, not like literally round,
not like a circle, but like not totally, somewhere between a circle and an oblong.
Yeah. Okay. There are a few nettles that we have like that, and those are broadleaf weeds.
Yeah.
And so, is there certain times a year you encounter this one more?
This time of year until it gets too hot in the summer.
Okay. I would use a broadleaf weed killer that's post-emergent, that kills existing weeds. And some of those are hard on St. Augustine when the temperatures are in the mid-80s and above, but we're kind of past that now. Although,
yeah, I really don't have St. Augustine. I basically have like Bermuda jig.
Oh, Bermuda. Well, it would be fine with that. But those nettles, if you catch them when they're small, they're very easy to kill with one of those sprays. The only alternative is to have a lawn so dense that they don't sprout because the seeds can't get sunlight.
The problem is they come up in my garden too. So
okay. Yeah, that sounds like you need gloves in the garden, or a hoe. But I try to catch them when they're younger. Once they hit a stage where they're blooming or setting seeds, it's a little too late to control with those products.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to mulch my summer tomatoes, and so they're still producing now.
Mm-hmm.
But now I got this nettle growing up underneath, and I can't refuse a weed.
Yeah.
And the plants are kind of overgrown to try to get to it. But yeah, I tried using Roundup. It didn't really phase it.
Oh, really? That's a surprise. Wow. Well, nature wins, right?
Well, yeah, I know. I wish it wasn't on this particular thing. I was just like...
We carve out and create what we consider Eden, where plants are in rows and everything's aesthetically arranged. But then nature just does what it does. It detests bare soil. Wherever sunlight hits the soil, nature plants a weed.
And I know I'm a little behind this year for planting a peach tree. I had a peach tree I lost to some kind of weevil problem. Something burrowed into it. I mean, is it too late to do peaches, or can I do it in the winter if I find some?
I would do it now rather than the winter.
Okay.
And this is going to be hard to do, but if you buy them now, they're coming in a container where they grew.
Right.
And the roots are going to be wrapped up in that container. And I would cut them in 3 places. So think of the container, the cylinder of soil that you've pulled out of the container with the roots, vertically down in 3 places. I use a box cutter knife, but if the root's big enough, you may need to use hand pruners. I know it just seems like, oh my gosh, how can I do that? But it helps. They will produce a lot of new roots from the base of that cut, and they will venture out into the soil and establish much better than if you don't prune them before you put them out. So don't be afraid to prune them, do them now. Now in winter time, the bare root trees arrive in some garden centers. And then that would be a January to February type thing. I would do it as early as possible in that time. So I would do it in January rather than in February, but you still can in February. And you can, bare root is a little less expensive per plant.
It's only one plant, so I'm not too worried about that. It's just the last one, the one that had the weevil from was a La Felicia, and I couldn't stand the fruit was horrible. It kept on double fruiting on me, and I was just like, okay. So I wasn't really like heartbroken that it died.
You said it was double fruiting?
Yeah, it had like a lot of them had like almost like a second little one attached to the main one.
Yeah, well, La Feliciana was developed in Louisiana, so you can blame the Cajuns for that one. But no, actually, that's actually a good peach. And it's good for our region, our amount of chilling. The reason they double, some varieties are more prone to that, but any kind of a stress late in the season, like late season drought stress, when they're setting their buds, I would say late summer drought stress, in the late summer and fall, early fall, they're forming those buds that'll be next year's fruit. And if the tree is drought stressed at that time, you get a lot more doubles. Those little twin peaches.
My other ones never have the problem. I can't remember the varieties off the top of my head. I always plant 3 or 4 different varieties for here because you never know what kind of winter you're going to get.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
well, there's a lot of new ones that Dr. Byrne at the Texas A&M Peach Breeding Program has created. They're on the market now. Just a lot of, you can go Google out there or go
I was doing like text prints and things like that. I think I was kind of looking at a little bit.
Text prints is an older one. Text prints, Tex Royal, and Tex Star are all older peaches. They're good. They're fine, but they each have like any plant. They have their pros and cons. But the new ones have, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember. Some of them are nectarines. Some of them are peaches. Some of them are white flesh, some are yellow flesh. But if you go to the Aggie Horticulture website, somewhere on the page there's a fruit section, and then you can learn more about some of the new releases.
Okay, can I ask you one more quick question? Because someone asked me and I don't know why.
Yes.
Do apricots just not grow here? Because you never see apricots.
Apricots are a roll of the dice. The trees will grow here, but we typically get them, they bloom too early and they get frosted, so you very seldom get a crop. They are self-fruitful, so you don't need 2, but occasionally, and there are a few varieties that people say, well, this is a little better at producing fruit, but I would say unless you just have a big property and want to have apricots every 7 years or something, I would not waste the space on an apricot.
You're better off trying an apple versus an apricot then.
I think so. Or like the fella said, take the money that you would have spent on those fruit trees and go to Las Vegas. Either way, you end up broke, but at least that way you have a good memory of a good time.
fair enough. Thank you for your time, Skip.
All right, Stacy. Thanks for the call. Back to the phones. By the way, our number is 845-5689, and we're going to talk to Hector. Hello, Hector, and thank you for waiting.
Hey, Skip. I got one question.
Yes.
All right. So I'm a relatively new plant parent, and I have a Monstera deliciosa that I've had for almost a year now.
Okay.
And I think it's growing its second aerial root. But the second one is growing really fast, and I heard that if you put a water source underneath that root, it'll start growing exponentially. But now it's like the aerial root is growing like too far, like to the side, to the edge of the pot. So I'm kind of wondering, what can I do with this aerial root? Can I cut it? Do I let it hit the soil, or
you can cut it? You can kind of bend the vining growth so that node is still inside the pot, so the root can go down there. You kind of pin it there, but either way it's fine. Or if you wanted to make another one, you could cut it off just between the plant and that root, and then the end of the shoot could be potted up, and you could start a new plant that way.
Oh, that's awesome! I did not even know that. So thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, all of those vining houseplants like pothos ivy and philodendrons, they have a little section with nothing happening, and then there's a node with a leaf and a root and a bud. And so if you just get that node with the leaf, the root, and the bud is there, out of the base of that leaf where it attaches will come a new shoot once it's rooted down and doing pretty well. I would put it in a pot and put some kind of a clear bag over the top, a dry cleaner bag or something much, much smaller than that would be fine. Just something to kind of create a humid chamber. So until that root really is going well, the leaf isn't starving for water. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
all right.
You make those things became real popular during the pandemic, and they were somewhat pricey. They still are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got a really small one, and it's grown a lot, and I just had no idea what to do with this aerial root, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Now, is yours a larger leaf type, or is it a smaller? Is the leaf more like the size of your hand, or are they getting bigger than that?
Right now, they're about the size of my hand, and they're getting bigger.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well,
it's really small. Yeah.
Yeah. Have fun. Houseplants are a blast, and there's a lot of new ones. I know. I was out at the Farm Patch the other day talking to them. At garden centers, we go through these cycles, and once the Christmas stuff gets out, here come the houseplants back in, and because it's still winter and people are inside, and they have some really cool stuff out there, as do other places. But it's always interesting to find a new houseplant you don't have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm really happy that I started planting over the pandemic.
Yep, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. There's a lot of memes about people that have kind of gone nuts on the houseplants. So.
Oh yeah, I've definitely seen those.
All right. Well, Hector, thank you so much for the call.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Our number, we've got time for another call or two, maybe. It's 845-5689, 845-5689, or by email at gardensuccess@tamu.edu. Carol emails that recently she saw several orchids planted with the roots in water. It was in a place that didn't really deal in plants. In other words, plants were some sideline. She tried it but wondered if it was successful as planting in soil. And I'm glad you asked that question, Carol. There is a thing online now about people going crazy over rooting plants in water. You can buy little bottles that have a bulb on the bottom that are across this wire hanging there, and you stick all your cuttings, one in each bottle, and then it grows these roots in the bottle. And yes, plants will root in water, but the oxygenation of the water is different than like in the soil, and a different kind of root forms. Roots in water are typically thin and lanky, and roots in soil are not that way. It is better for a plant to root it in soil or in a soilless medium like perlite or vermiculite, maybe with some peat or maybe not, but where it has good aeration but still good moisture. It's much better to root a plant in that than it is to root it in water. And I know this is right because if you look at the industry, people who are growing plants from cuttings for a living, they're not growing them in water. They're not rooting them in water. They're rooting them in some type of a medium that's aerated. And so can you root in water? Absolutely you can. So could they put an orchid where the roots were in water? No, I'm a little surprised that the orchid's even putting up with that at all. They need good drainage, and if you want to kill an orchid, just overwater it. That's why, they're terrestrial plants. They grow on a tree trunk in the jungle, and so it drains away. They love moisture, but they don't want to be in the ground. They're not terrestrial plants. They live on the sides of trunks and places like that. So when we pot them up in bark chips and substance like moss and substances like that, where it stays moist and humid, but it's very well aerated. So I don't know. I'm surprised. I have not seen that. Maybe other people have, but no, don't do it in water. And if you have other plants, I'm kind of expanding your question here, Carol, but anyone listening, if you have other plants you want to root, Pinterest, Instagram, Facebook, there, all these kinds of places, you see all the weird and cool stuff that people are doing, and it doesn't mean that it's a horticulturally good practice. And so that would be the case with these. If you want to root plants, there are some great ways to root plants. And once you learn to root plants from cuttings, oh my gosh, the world is your oyster, or the world is your monstera, I should say, since we were just talking about monstera. The ability to start new plants from plants you have, a friend has, we were talking about Christmas cactus a while ago. So your friend has a Christmas cactus, and they let you break a little branch off of it and take it home, and next thing you know, you have a Christmas cactus just by learning to root those things. So that's kind of fun stuff. I encourage you to do that. Thank you, Carol, for that question. Okay, let's see. David emails. And David has some mustard greens. David's mustard greens are getting eaten. There's some critters that are eating holes in the mustard itself. And I am trying to get the video to play here for me so I can see what they are. Sorry about that. While I'm trying to get that thing to boot up so we can identify them. Here we go. Okay, so the mustard greens are being eaten by little beetles, and you can't find the beetles because they are very shy and they hide from you. And if you've tried to grow mustard before, or other greens, you probably have seen a lot of holes in plants. If it's a blue leaf vegetable like broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, it's probably a little caterpillar, an inchworm type caterpillar, called a looper, a cabbage looper. And so those, you turn the leaves over, they're the same color as the leaf, so you got to kind of look, but they're there. You can find them and smash them, or you can spray it with BT. For the other greens like mustard and certain other kinds of greens, if you're growing radish and turnips and things, and you're getting holes in those, it's most often a little beetle. You'll have a hard time finding them, but you can spray for them, and I kind of have mixed feelings about it. If you use a labeled spray at the proper rate and you follow the instructions on days to harvest and all that, it is relatively safe to do that. But when I'm thinking about coating all of the leaf of something I'm about to eat out of my garden with a spray, it doesn't appeal to me to do it that way. I don't want to come across as any pesticide out there you use is going to kill you kinds of things. That's not true at all. But a lot of people prefer to garden organically, and even those that don't care that much, that when you can avoid having to spray, it's a good thing. So what I do with my greens is when I'm going to plant them, I prepare the soil, do the seeds, and then put little PVC hoops, stick them in the ground, bend them over, and stick them back in the ground on the other side of the bed, and cover it with a light row cover fabric, a very lightweight, super lightweight, so the sun shines through. And what that does is it creates a screen porch. And anything that comes along, maybe it's a cabbage looper moth that wants to lay eggs, or a beetle that wants to lay eggs, they can't get to your plants. And so you lift up the sides when it's time to harvest and put the side back down. And so you're growing them in a well-lighted screen porch. That's the best way to grow these things. But there are insecticides that will kill beetles. I find it to be more of a challenge. And usually, and in the case of these that I see, David, there's a lot of leaf starting to be eaten up. Now, for the non-squeamish among you, you can ignore the holes. That's just, the wash the greens well, and if there were a bug on them, wash it off and eat it anyway. Just because a bug went through there and ate a hole in the leaf doesn't mean that leaf is inedible by any means. So don't be squeamish like that. Get out, and if plants have holes in them, that's just fine. You can still harvest them. At least I should say up to a point. I recognize that when it's Swiss cheese, it's a little hard to get much out of it. Let's see. I want to go back to the emails one more time. Oh, an article has been circling about a study in Houston on trees. I believe it was done by Rice University. Some folks connected with Rice University, and typically the headline will say something like super trees in Houston or something like that. And they studied a bunch of different trees, and they looked at different aspects of those trees, different pro or con type of aspects. But one of the things they looked at is their ability to take particulates out of the air, and that could be dust and smog and particles and things that the tree is able to sort of filter or to capture. Maybe it lands on the leaf and kind of gets stuck or whatever. And also some of the chemical substances that they can help filter out of the air. And it's not a night and day difference, but they do provide that service, and it's a significant service. But the article goes on to promote sycamore and live oak as being the two trees, I believe those were the two, that they found to be the most beneficial. Well, there are a lot of reasons to plant trees. There's aesthetics. There's the heat island effect in big cities, the cooling effect. The blooms or all kinds of things. The benefit to the air, the benefit to aesthetics and our mental well-being and all that, those are all good. But there's also reasons to not plant trees. Houston is a live oak forest already. Now, I'm not saying don't plant a live oak there, but plant something else. There's other reasons to plant trees. Sycamore is a great tree, does okay. If you're going to plant one, I would choose a Mexican sycamore over just the typical one you see around. And just realize that lace bugs are going to be a problem in late summer, and they're going to turn your green leaves kind of bronze or white. And so that's going to be a pest you have to deal with, because sycamores are very prone to that pest. So lots of pros and cons to any plant. But I see an article like that. Number one, I'm excited because people are promoting planting trees. And then number two, I think of the yeah buts that are involved in it. And so if you want to plant a tree, call the extension office. Let us give you the pros and cons of a number of different ones that'll do well here in the Brazos Valley. Hey, thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again next week.
You've been listening to Garden Success with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension horticulturist Skip Richter. Join us again next week as Skip discusses your questions about gardening and landscaping in the Brazos Valley.
Garden Success is brought to you in part by the Arbor Gate, featuring unusual plants, artisan-created decorative pieces, and a constantly changing array of items that bring beauty, comfort, and even flavor to the home and garden. Arbor Gate, 15635 FM 2920, Tomball, Texas, 281-351-8851, or arborgate.com.
Garden Success is also brought to you by the Farm Patch, 3519 South College Avenue in Bryan, 979-822-7209.